Yeah, I want a picture. If you're not gonna be obsessed with that. See, this was before.
who's championing in terms of educating the community politically, and we have a couple of other people. So we are here this afternoon to listen to every one of us who is able to tackle some of these basic challenges. Okay, and we are hoping that we hear something good that we can take back to our community to say, hey, there is hope. There is hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Akikumi. Let's keep it in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our candidates as well, everyone. I stand here this afternoon to represent ACCH, that's African Caribbean Council of Alton. And the reason why we are here today is one of the pillars by which we stand in ACCH. And what we do is we advocate, we empower for an inclusive, and equitable African Caribbean community in Alton region. And the reason why we are here is one of those pillars, right? And part of those things that we do is we also organize Let's Talk virtual series, whereby we invite, distinguished speakers and distinguished, citizens across Canada, to talk to us and to talk to the community about, pressing issues ranging from how to do business with the government, infrastructure, education, and we have one of our recent Let's Talk virtual series this month with the heads of Alton District Catholic School Board, right, which is happening April 25th. And one of those things that we do to empower is we empower our youth, because we believe they are the future leaders of tomorrow, right? So we want to empower them to know that, yes, they have support. So we do that by, bringing out the African Caribbean, Excellence Scholarship Award for distinguished, students that show excellence in academics and leadership, right? So, and also, we also do the Black History Month, which we just went past in the month of February, right? So in this way, we kind of advocate for the Black community. We advocate for the African Caribbean community, right? Such that, we can always show the support and be the voice for the voiceless, right? So we also employ you, to join us, be an ally, support us. You can go to our website, africancaribbean.ca, right? And you can see lots of information on what we do and how you can join and, support us, especially towards our Excellence Scholarship Awards for the students, whereby you can, donate, also support us financially in any way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Olumide.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I stand on existing protocol, and I just want to talk about CAP. And CAP has a rich history rooted in supporting and fostering the professional and personal development of Nigerian professionals in Canada. Originally established to serve the Nigerian community, CMP has always been committed to excellence, network, and community building. Over time, the organization recognized the need to expand its scope and embrace a more inclusive approach to better serve the broader African professional community in Canada. This transformation into the Council of African Professionals in Canada reflects our commitment to promoting diversity, inclusion, as well as belief in the power of unity across the African diaspora. By embracing a Pan-African perspective, CAP aims to create a robust network that brings together professionals from various fields and backgrounds to share knowledge, experience, and opportunity. Our mission at CAP is to empower the African professional in Canada by providing them with the resource, mentorship, and support they need to thrive in their careers and contribute positively to Canadian society. We achieve this through various initiatives such as workshops, seminars, networking events, and career development programs. Additionally, CAP actively collaborates with government and industrial partners to advocate for policies and opportunities that benefit African professionals. As we continue to grow and evolve, CAP remains dedicated dedicated to fostering a sense of community and collaboration among African professionals in Canada. We look forward to building stronger partnership and working together with our counterparts to drive positive change and create a better future for all. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir. In a very short little while, you've heard a lot about some of our organizations in our community. So really, you need to check it out. Oh, I need to recognize former MPP Indira Naidu Harris. Please welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now it's time to get to know our candidates. Are we excited? Yes. Fantastic. So, this was done in within 7 days. And I really, really want to thank the candidates for accepting. And I do need to mention that, when we sent it out, even we were thinking, is it not too short? But then the election was called and it has to happen. And so there's never a better time for anything than now. So here we are doing what we got to do. So I will be calling the candidates to the stage and introduce, of course, the anchor. I'm not going to be your anchor. I'm too beautiful to do that. I have another beautiful lady that will be doing that for us. So I will start by introducing Eddie Strachan. For 20 years, Eddie has been a fierce community advocate and public sector worker in Milton, who has dedicated herself to community work through community development, halting occupational health clinics for Ontario workers, the Oakville and District Labour Council, and most recently, the Ontario Public Service Employees Union. Eddie is not just a candidate and a champion for Milton workers. She's a neighbor who is driven by a belief in a better province. She believes in Milton, where everyone has a fair chance at a good life and knows we can get there together. So please welcome Eddie to the stage. Now, Gillen Nando Aries has called Milton home since birth. So in my culture, we'll say that the person entered the place with the head. And understands the importance and value of community service. Gillen has worked locally with the provincial and federal government, small businesses, and at Wilfrid Laurier University. As manager of community affairs for MP Adam Vancouverton, Gillen provided frontline support to thousands of local residents when they needed it most, including during the depth of the COVID-19 pandemic. Gillen is experienced in governance and has sat on several local boards, including the Conservation Halting Foundation Board, where he has served as director for the past 5 years. He's also a dedicated community volunteer in Milton and the son of former local Liberal MPP and Cabinet Minister Indira Naidu Harris. Please welcome Gillen Naidu Harris. And last but not the least, Carl Utten is a long-time Alton resident who has been a member of the Green Movement since 2019, when he was drawn in by the ideal of a sustainable, equitable, and affordable future for Ontarians. A strong believer in the power of grassroots organizing, Kyle is championing Ontario Green leader Mike Scherner's message of social and environmental justice at every doorstep in Milton. A community activist, volunteer, and experienced campaigner, Kyle believes in the key to creating a better Ontario is by tackling the climate crisis at its source. The industries and norms that fuel consumption puts production ahead of the planet and profits over people in an unsubstantial cycle. Carl knows the residents of Milton are concerned about the protection of our green belts, returning to a truly public healthcare system and addressing the housing and cost of living crisis affecting all of us. Is ready to listen to what matters to you in this election. Please welcome Carl Hutton. And finally, it is my pleasure to introduce your anchor today in the person of Edosa Adams-Idode. Edosa Adams-Idode is a longtime resident of Milton and avid volunteer in multiple organizations, and she's a lawyer, so be ready. She knows how to argue a case. So please welcome Edosa Adams-Idode.
Thank you, Lady Abba. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us today and all those online. I guess we have a larger crowd online thanks to COVID. So we have a very multilateral way of communication. But today we're looking forward to a future that represents leadership and accountability. We will hear directly from each of the candidates here with regard to their policy and their mandate that is focused on the areas that MPP, our representative for Queen's Park, will be dealing with. These issues are education, health care, social welfare, and our highways. As Lady Abba had mentioned, my name is Edosa Adams Idode. As a lawyer, we all know the role of the MPP is to enact, amend, and repeal laws. But more importantly, our voice in Queen's Park on May 2nd, Election Day, will be someone among these candidates who will respond to our concerns as constituents and as general public in Milton. So I thank you warmly and I thank you all for attending today. I would say this offhand, we had extended an invitation to the other candidates for today's debate. Z. Hamid of the Conservative Party and John Spinard and Arabelle Vida. John Spinard is the New Blue Party and Arabella Vida is for the Independent Party, and they have not responded. So we're glad to have the candidates here that would respond to our questions. So in no particular order, I'm going to be asking each of the candidate questions. They have 2 minutes. We have a timekeeper here. And when I ask them questions, we're going to have the audience ask their questions. Please, when you're asking your questions, we don't need a long narrative. And due to the time constraints, we just would like you to say your name and ask your question. And then for those online, we're having our team on the online group feed us with questions from the online people on the view. So my first question goes to Eddie Strachan. Thank you. In September 2023, Canada's NDP leader, Jajit Singh, was in Halifax, meeting with university students about the lack of affordable housing in their city. We all know we're in a crisis because the Conservatives and Liberals, according to Jajit Singh, have stopped building houses on homes for people people can afford. According to Jajit Singh, the leader of the NDP party, they let big money investors and corporate landlords take over the housing market, driving up prices for everyone else so they could make a quick buck. My question, madam, is how can lower income families maintain access to affordable houses in Milton, particularly before the constituents you're seeing before you today?
And will you give me a 30-second warning to the 2 minutes, just so that I don't go over?
Yes. So before you answer the question, bear with me. I like to stand. I'm used to standing, if you don't mind. So I would like each of the candidates to tell us what they stand for, what they intend to do for Miltoners, and what they are committed to achieve if elected on May 2nd. In no particular order, Edie, I will start with you again. That's okay.
So is this okay? There's not too much feedback? All right. So as introduced, I'm Edie Strahan. I'm your NDP candidate here in Milton. The kind of work that I do is community work. That's my union background, is supporting our communities. And I have a long list of demonstrated commitment to supporting communities, and in particular, racialized people and racialized communities. you know, I don't think one person is the big answer. I think you were absolutely right when you said you are the voice in Queen's Park, because the power is in the people. People is what make government make actions or positive change. But people need to be organized in doing that. My commitment is not to come up with a new set of ideas, but to listen to community and to amplify those voices. That's my role in Queen's Park, to bring the voice of the people at the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you, Edie. The next to our Kyle Houghton. Tell us about yourself. Tell us what your commitment is and what you intend to do if elected on May 2nd.
No problem. Thank you very much. And hopefully this sounds okay. So as mentioned, my name is Kyle Hutton. I'm primarily running in this by-election to hold Doug Ford to account for his many broken promises. These are promises ranging all over the board, but we're really focusing on the promise that he made way back in 2018 to shut down the Campbellville quarry that he has not moved on whatsoever. We're going to hold him to account on his promise to build and strengthen truly public health care in Ontario, which unfortunately he has set back by disrespecting healthcare workers and underpaying staff. And we're going to hold him to account on his promise to create affordable housing throughout Ontario, including right here in Milton, which unfortunately, to use a quote from a particular federal politician, he is more acting like a gatekeeper for housing than he is somebody that is going to get it done, as he promised back in 2022. You might not know much about the Ontario Greens, but we are a party that I like to summarize as trendsetters. We are a party that when we showed up about 2 decades ago, we talked about climate change when nobody else was, and then all of a sudden it's the big issue on everybody's plate. When Mike Schreiner wanted to double ODSP rates while everybody was offering lower, the NDP and the other parties raced to catch up to us. And when we introduced new legislation to bring in affordable housing options like fourplexes and gentle density, which will reduce costs throughout the province and including right here in Milton without disrupting our greenbelt lands, the other parties race to catch up with us. But at the end of the day, we need to deal with the major problem. Whoever wins this by-election is not going to change the power at Queen's Park, but it will send a message about the kind of Ontario we want to see. And I'm hoping today, throughout this debate, we get to see, or you folks get to see what that means for the Green Party. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halton. Over to Galen Nadeau-Harris. Tell us what your mandate will be if elected on May 2nd in Queen's Park.
Turn it on too. Oh my goodness. Sorry, I don't know what's going on here. Hi, my name is Galen Nadeau-Harris, and I'm the Ontario Liberal candidate running here in Milton. You heard a little bit about my background through that bio that was read earlier, but I've been in this community my entire life. I was born in the hospital at the corner of Bronte and Derry, and I've spent the life that I've lived here trying to make Milton a better place. I've worked locally for our Member of Parliament, Adam Van Couverden, as some boots on the ground, trying to provide families with the service they needed, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic when they weren't always able to get help on their own. Worked with the provincial and federal governments, also with Wilfrid Laurier locally, trying to get that campus built for our kids, and with Conservation Halton, trying to protect our local green spaces. And I think we're all hitting on some similar points here that the current government is not meeting the standard. You look around town, I think things are still pretty good. That's why we're happy to live in Milton, because we love it here and we love the services and the supports that we have. But if you look at some of the things that matter most, things that are directly provincial responsibilities, healthcare, you have longer and longer wait times. You have people that are paying for services or even at times flying back home when they could be getting served directly here in Milton. Education, you have larger class sizes and educators that are being asked to do more with less time and time again. Look at affordable housing. You know, I'm turning 30 this year. My wife and I are comfortably in the middle class. I don't see buying a home anywhere on my horizon. I don't think a lot of people in this community that are my age and younger do either. So there are real concerns this community has, and I've not felt that they've had a voice on those concerns in Queen's Park for a long time. The past Conservative MPP was not responsive to local constituents. He didn't listen. He didn't offer them a voice in Queen's Park. I would like to do that. We have a plan to build gentle density here in town and create more affordable housing opportunities, to reduce wait times in hospitals, to lower class sizes, and to make sure that you folks are well represented each and every day in Queen's Park. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. These are your candidates. Can we give them a round of applause? So the debate will start now. And as I said earlier on, if elected, our voice on Queen's Park will deal with education, healthcare, social welfare, and highways. So if you're asking your questions online, make sure your questions are focused. So I'm going to go back to my original question, and I'm going to read it again just to make sure that I give all the candidates a fair and reasonable time to respond. We do have a timekeeper. She would show you a sheet. If it's 1 minute to go, each question you have 2 minutes. And then if it's 30 seconds, she's going to be showing a white sheet so that you all are aware of your time that you have. So I'm going to repeat that question again, Ms. Strachan. In September 2023, Canada's NDP leader, Jagin Singh, was in Halifax, meeting with university students about the lack of affordable housing in that city. This is a quote from Mr. Singh. "We are in this crisis because conservatives and liberals stop building homes people can afford. They let big money investors and corporate landlords take over the housing market, driving up prices for everyone else so that they could make a quick buck." My question to you, Ms. Strachan, how can lower income families maintain access to affordable housing with big money investors and corporate landlords acquiring more units than ever? And this is with respect to residents in Milton. Thank you.
So I don't know how many people are aware of the Africville story in Halifax and the environmental racism that happened there. People were displaced, their lands were taken, they had ownership of the land, and there's still an ongoing fight for these people to get their properties back. And that's not what Jagmeet was speaking about, but that's also something that ought to be flagged that's happening. And I come from Nova Scotia, so I'm familiar with the area, but affordable housing is an across Canadian issue. And I have to say that, there is no money to be made in affordable housing, right? Nobody's making money on affordable housing. And so rents go up. They're building condos, they're building apartment buildings, they're building all of those things, but they're not building affordable homes. And again, this is an issue that we have to come together and fight against. Like, people deserve to have nice homes, right? To grow up in a safe place, to have food on the table, to have a roof over their head, to be able to afford these things. And let's look at the whole systemic issue around like minimum wage. Like, minimum wage and living wage are two different things. And if you aren't making reasonable salary, how can you afford these homes at all? So I agree with the mid-density. I think that's really important. I think communities where children are safe and can play are very important. And the NDP does have a platform for doing this, but the NDP aren't the ones in power right now. It's the Conservatives. And that's why adding a voice in the legislature with the official opposition party that holds the PCs to task is really important. And again, I go back to the voices in the people, right? I am here to echo and amplify the voice of the people and the concerns that they have. Thank you.
Thank you. So my next question goes to Mr. Halton. Same on the housing crisis. Could you tell us what policies the NDP has or exist, or what policies you propose if elected to Queen's Park to address the housing crisis with respect to purchasing or renting?
Right. Thank you very much. So I don't know much about the NDP plan, but the Ontario Greens. So a little bit of history. Last year, we had a big by-election out in Kitchener Centre, not too far from here, where our main campaign focus was on housing. It is such a major issue across Ontario, but it's especially deeply felt in places like Kitchener, as well as Milton and Burlington, where there simply is nothing affordable going on. Kitchener is a little bit cheaper, but like everywhere else, it is starting to grow in price, especially rental costs. I know from my own experience, for example, my uncle who is on ODSP, he has his entire ODSP check, which is about $1,200, go to his rent. And he's lucky because he was in there 15 years ago and they can't raise it on him. If he tried to get anywhere else in our community, if he tried to move out, he would not be able to afford without some major help from our own family. It's a serious crisis. The Ontario Greens are proposing to not only just build more density, which is a solution to the crisis. Basically, when you're able to put more homes on lots, you're able to drive down price. It's a very simplified explanation of it, but we can do that without sprawl, as Doug Ford was initially planning on doing with the Greenbelt land grab. We can do that in Milton, and we propose bills and move them forward to create that gentle density. But we also need to recognize co-op housing and deeply affordable units and inclusionary zoning as all part of the solution. And no government, including the federal government, which just put out a fairly good housing plan, seems to be doing this. These are things that communities and housing strategies and task forces have all asked for, but it seems like nobody is doing it. The Ontario Greens have put forward plans to absolutely make this part of Ontario's housing strategy going forward, and I'm glad to see the Liberals and the NDP move forward with us. It's time to make sure that the PCs do as well. That's why I'm hoping to be sent as MPP to Milton to join my other two colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halton, for the Green Party. Housing is a big ticket topic for the African Caribbean community because we do know that given the demographics of the influx of diverse communities in Milton, particularly the African Caribbean community, we wanna know if you are elected on May 2nd. This is to Mr. Nadeau Harris. What would you do as a voice for the people in making sure that housing is affordable for the influx of the diverse communities, particularly the African Caribbean community in Milton?
Yeah, oh, that was a little louder than the last microphone. Absolutely, there are steps that need to be taken. Doug Ford has come in, he's cut rent control across the province, and I think we're seeing the effects, certainly here in Milton, skyrocketing rents, houses that are out of range for whether it's diverse communities, younger Canadians, out of reach of everyday families in Milton. And we've had a government in place provincially for 6 years. They've had a long time to work to rectify this issue, and they've made it clear it's not one of their priorities. For my part, I would echo some of the comments of my, I was going to say colleagues, I don't know if that's quite the right word, my fellow candidates on this stage, that I think it's important that we look at ways to build gentle density to fill the missing middle in housing. Not everybody wants or can manage to live the life they want in a condo, and not everybody can afford the sort of houses that we see here in Milton. Certainly, we're looking at 7 figures. That's well out of reach for somebody of my stature and of folks in the community. So by cutting through red tape to allow for 4 plexes and 4 units to be built as of right province-wide, we're going to make sure that that missing middle is built and that folks have the opportunity to buy a variety of housing options. And you're right, absolutely, we have to look at not just you know, the sort of simple solutions, but co-op housing, rent to own. These are programs that have to be part of any full comprehensive housing plan to ensure that the folks in this province and in this community have access to the housing solutions they need.
Thank you. So the next question we go to Mr. Galen Nadeau Harris. You recently tweeted that our healthcare and education systems are crumbling while Doug Ford is busy taking care of his wealthy inside friends. What will you do differently if elected to Queen's Park to deal with the long waiting hours at a hospital in terms of healthcare and placing a priority on our education system in Milton?
What would I do differently than Doug Ford? How about everything? I've been incredibly frustrated watching the inaction of this government on a number of issues, but particularly these 2 issues. We have a lot of healthcare workers, education workers here in Milton. We have a lot of young families and multi-generational families. So we have kids in schools. We have elderly parents that need to be taken care of in our hospitals. And, you know, I can point to larger statistics, but for me, I like to look at the people in my circle. I have a friend that was with us at our campaign launch last weekend that had just gotten out of the hospital after having spent 3 days in a hallway with a kidney condition, never having seen a hospital bed. I have a friend that decided to fly back to India because they could get treated more quickly than waiting here with the backlogs that exist in our healthcare system. I have a friend that had a surgery canceled 3 times with a condition getting worse and worse over and over that didn't get the service they needed because the current system is not meeting the standard. If you look at our schools, you know, I had a volunteer out with me last week that said that their school has 55 portables. There's a $1 billion repair backlog in Ontario schools, and educators are being asked to do more with less. So I think it starts with ensuring that we're training, whether it's creating pathways in our post-secondary education systems or through recognizing foreign credentials to train more healthcare and education workers, making sure those education workers and healthcare workers are properly compensated as well, not being fought with through bills like 124, looking to cap their wages. And ensuring that these systems really do start to work with us again. We have a comprehensive plan online. I'm short on time, but Ontario Liberals have a plan to reduce those backlogs, to reduce wait times, and ensure that we are increasing the supply of educators and healthcare workers to address classroom sizes as well.
Thank you, Mr. Nadeau-Harris. And to Mr. Houghton, could you respond to the health crisis and the number of portables in the schools across Milton?
Yeah.
And how would the Green Party address that issue, specifically with respect to increasing funding?
Yeah. So common saying, show me how you spend your money and I'll show you what your priorities are, right? Doug Ford's priorities are very easy to see. He's spending billions on the unnecessary Highway 413. He spent millions on costly lawsuits to stop people from looking at mandate letters for his cabinet ministers. He spent millions fighting communities across Ontario on anything ranging from how they want to develop their own lands, to the strong mayor powers, to it's ridiculous the amount of stuff that Doug Ford's government seems to get into while not funding our healthcare, our schools, and our public services. You know, we just recently had this big battle, and thank God they were able to overturn Bill 124, which depressed wages for healthcare workers across the province, which led to so many of them leaving, just outright leaving, either for the private sector or leaving Ontario overall. And we're still going to have years of backlog to catch up. And that was another fight that Doug Ford spent so much time in. For what? Just because he wanted to win. Just because he wanted to say that he had some sort of right to control how the unions were working. The Ontario Greens, and you know, I'm proud to say the Ontario Liberals and the NDP were united on saying together Bill 124 and other measures that were unnecessary and just disrespected our workers. And the way they treated our teachers as well, it's enough is enough. Nobody is, you know, more important to our communities than our service workers. And the fact that Doug Ford cannot get that through his head means he needs to be sent a message with this by-election that enough is enough. He needs to be held accountable, or else he's not going to be re-elected in 2026. And we can do that with this by-election. Thank you.
Thank you. And to Ms. Stratton, is the NDP's mandate different from what the Liberal and the Green Party have said with respect to the increasing number of portables and lack of funding for education, as well as long waiting lines in healthcare? We've been hearing about the healthcare for a while, so I'd like to know whether the NDP's position is different.
Instead of the party line, I'm going to give you the ED line, right? Because I've done a lot of advocacy work with the Ontario Health Coalition, and I know how underfunding affects people in the healthcare system. I mean, if we want to talk about patients, they've been privatizing the tests that are cheap to perform so that people can make money on that. And yet, you know, something like a cancer test that's very expensive stays within the healthcare system and needs to be paid for. So now they don't even have the extra money because they've sold it off, right? That is helping to create this crisis in healthcare. Don't even get me started on the fact that a lot of healthcare tends to be delivered by new immigrants to this country and racialized workers, in particular PSW work, which Ontario has a law that if you work for a corporation providing PSW care in somebody else's home, do you know what they get paid? Minimum wage for 12 hours on a 24-hour shift. That is absolutely shameful. And, you know, during COVID, oh my God, I just get so worked up on this. Okay, I've only got 2 minutes and I have 2 answers. But so I've done a lot of work around healthcare, and it is shameful. With respect to education and the portables, yes, those things are underfunded, but my opinion, the bigger issue when it comes to schools is the racism in the schools. We saw what happened at the Peel District School Board. Who did anything about that? Nothing. When I got elected to my position in OPSU, Culla came up to me and he read me my rights and he told me, Edie, you need to do this. And I did it, right? Providing support to the community. That's what Labor does. That's our values. I'll end there.
Thank you so much. And in line with what you've said about what they do to foreign trained workers, I think that's a segue to my next question. So how do we get these professionals to work in their field of academic qualification to support the healthcare system with our current labor shortages? Yes, please.
So there are people that are advocating for equivalency, right? Or at least to have some kind of very short-term amount of time in education and training to recognize the credentials. I'm sorry, but if you're a doctor in country A, then I feel that you should be respected enough to be a doctor in country B. Maybe there's, you know, a test to make sure you meet the minimum standards or whatever, but we have the same issue in Canada with different universities. Not all universities teach people to be, you know, the best, right? There are discrepancies there. I think that in our colleges, actually, some of our OPSU workers are working with people to help make these systems go faster or to eliminate the red tape.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the audience very quickly to ask questions from the audience, but I have a question. This is to go to Mr. Houghton, sorry. We all know that Milton is a family-oriented community where people families gather all the time, but we'd like to know, how would you maintain the extracurricular activities for kids and to ensure that infrastructures for them are available and accessible in Milton?
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, it goes back to, you know, showing how you're spending. I'll show you your priorities. One of the main reasons that we've struggled, and this is the same thing in Burlington as well, which is part of the riding. I always have to remind people of that, where there's not enough funding to go around, so people are stretching their priorities. You know, this community center, which is a little bit older, you know, needs to get the funding over potentially this new one, which might want to bring in a new program. I think if we refocus our priorities, we have a government that looks at things like, again, Highway 413, which is billions of dollars for something that is just absolutely unnecessary. We can bring that money back into our infrastructure for real community infrastructure, not just more cars in another lane that's going to save 6 seconds on a trip to Toronto. For some folks, not for everybody. We can actually fund these programs that we want. It is ridiculous that we seem to always be focusing on more infrastructure for cars, more infrastructure for people to get around when we're not focusing on infrastructure within these communities. And I think just in general, the PC governments since 2018 have lacked, for some reason, any will to just put in money. They have a $9 billion deficit, but I could not tell you where they're putting that money. You know, they have $5 billion potentially from the federal government to include more housing. That was the incentive. And they don't want to take it because Doug Ford doesn't want to give Justin Trudeau a win. That's not ridiculous. The focus should be on people and building our communities, not on political gamemanship between the provinces and the federal government. And as a member for Milton, I would go forward and tell Doug Ford to stop with the games and start funding people in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nadu Harris, could you tell us, you mentioned in your intro that you grew up in this town, and I wanted to speak to you with respect to the youths in the community. How would you, if elected on May 2nd, provide jobs for the increasing number of youths in our community, and what policy do you think you would enact if elected to represent us in Milton?
Sure. Yeah, and it is a difficult situation, I think, for a lot of our youth in Milton. As somebody that grew up here, we were talking about recreation a second ago, played hockey at John Tonelli, kicked soccer balls around at Brian Best. I think I first got engaged, whether it was in politics or in work, as a young man. I mean, my first job was parking cars at Chudley's out on 25. And I feel like the pathways that existed when I was younger, whether it was for recreation, for employment, for education, for community engagement, don't necessarily exist in the same way now. And I think part of it is, again, I like Kyle's line very much of show me where you're spending your money and I'll show you where your priorities are. This current government is not prioritizing spending in job creation, prioritizing spending in creating pathways for our young people. And I think two of the areas we would focus are examining, both if you look at the small businesses to create pathways for them to hire more young people, examining the suite of tax credits and grants that exist to ensure that they're working for businesses, not against them. So there are incentives to hire more young people and people from diverse communities. And we'd also ensure that on the education side, that our schools are getting the funding they deserve, because at a post-secondary level, and I can say this because I worked at Laurier for a year, our universities are being woefully underfunded right now. And we're in a very difficult position where they're relying on international students who are being extorted, honestly, financially, because there's no other option for them to make their ends meet and pay their bills. So get those universities back to working for students and ensure that that they're getting the training they need to be employed in this community, I think would be two areas that I would lend my focus if I were the MPP.
Thank you, Mr. Nadu Harris. So now over to our audience. We do have some questions for the audience. We do have a timekeeper that will go around to, if you have a question, raise your hand. Once again, let's keep the questions focused and let's avoid narrative so that we have our candidates respond to those questions as best as they can. So could you, if you have a question, stand up, please, could you say your name and ask your question directly? And then let us know which candidate that you want to answer that question as well.
Okay, I'm not sure which candidate.
Okay, ask your question, then we can direct it to all the candidates.
Yes, my name is Funlayo. The question I want to ask is about the busing system in Milton, especially on the major streets or road. So, for example, Trafalgar Road or Steeles Avenue. I noticed that there's no busing system, and it's really a bad one. Another one I want to talk about is when, because 2 years ago, 21B can come from Union Station all the way and come to Milton, but now it only goes to Oakville. So that's really not good. So any one of you, if
once again, this is a question that, thank you so much, Ms. Funke, for that question. We're starting with the candidates. I think Mr. Horton, you can respond to that question with respect to highways, improving transportation in Milton, with specific response to her question. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a conversation not too similar or dissimilar to this a couple of years back. The fact is, there's no real transportation connection between South Halton and Milton, which, when you think about it, because we're one region, it's kind of ridiculous, right? There's no way for me to get from Branch Street downtown all the way up to Ontario and Maine on a public transportation. If I wanted to take public transportation, I could maybe find a GO bus or take the GO train to Union all the way back out, because the systems aren't connected. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but it goes back to our spending on highways. We are focusing on Highway 413, which is not going to save time for folks. Everybody thinks, well, it's another highway. It's another way to get around to Toronto if we need to. It's simply proven not to do enough for folks in Milton and the other areas where it's going to go through. What we should focus on is have two-way all-day transit service out here to Milton from the GO station, and then invest in the community, in the region, and in the town of Milton itself to build up its transit infrastructure. We talk a lot about getting away from vehicles. The shift to EVs is great, but the real way to reduce emissions is to get onto transit. And a green government, whenever we have one, will focus on putting transit first. because that is the way we reduce our emissions. It's also the way how we actually build out this community properly. We don't build communities around cars, or at least we shouldn't. We should be building around centers and allowing people to actually travel in the community towards that center, either through just walking or being able to hop on a bus or some other form of available transportation. So as a green MPP, my focus would be to get that funding to the town, to the region, to actually build up that transit infrastructure and not on, again, another unnecessary highway through our green belt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Any other candidates want to respond in 1 minute to the question raised by Ms. Fumi? And over to you, Ms. Eddie Stratton.
So if I understood the the question accurately, it was about infrastructure within Milton. So I just want to flag something because I think it's really important. So yes, we're running for a provincial seat to be a member of provincial parliament, right? And so you have community monies, you have regional monies, and you have provincial monies. And so as an MPP, you have a certain jurisdiction and you have certain authorities within that, which wouldn't be municipal. But the important part is you have influence. So even if you don't have the authority, you always have influence to work with the people locally and federally to make those positive changes that we need.
Thank you. Mr. Nadu, Harris?
Yeah, I wish I had 5 minutes to talk about transit. So I'll try and be brief. Ontario Liberals secured an investment previous to the 2018 election in all-day two-way GO service from the Milton line. Secured an investment in an increased parking garage, in a new station. That was one of the first things the Conservatives cut after they took office. Of course, we have to draw the distinction between the transit that's within the provincial jurisdiction and within the local jurisdiction. I think it's been frustrating watching certain members of our local town council drag their feet on increasing our public transit options locally and trying to integrate regionally. Transit isn't something that you wait for demand and then build it. You have to build it and then the people will come. You can't rely on transit if there isn't transit to rely on. You can't expect people to leverage that system if that system isn't there for them to benefit from. So certainly, I've had town councilors out knocking doors with me, and we're hearing consistently that we need to beef up our local transit system. I would also be more than comfortable using my voice to advocate for those investments at the town council level and at the regional level. Or I skipped regional because I don't have enough time. At the provincial level, would certainly be advocating for all-day two-way GO service. We've needed it. The Conservatives have had 6 years to get it done. I find that a hilarious slogan because I can't point to one thing they've gotten done since they've gotten in. But we would hold that commitment. We would be fighting hard for all-day two-way and also for that second station on Trafalgar Road, which we know is going to be key both to transit options and also to building density and building employment options that will keep our youth and educated people in our community.
Thank you to all the candidates for your response to the question. I hope it was answered. Do we have another question from the community? Please say your name and ask your question.
Hi, good evening to the candidates. My name is Samuel and I live in this town. My question goes to all the candidates as a matter of fact. You've all highlighted some of the issues that we have in this in the province and by extension in Milton. We've talked about infrastructure deficit, housing, and etc. We all can all agree on that. Now, what I'm struggling with right now is that I want to walk out of this place and say this is the person I'm going to vote for on May 2nd. Now, can you all kind of tell why you are different from the other person? Why I should vote for you on May 2nd? Like, while we all can agree on all the issues, but I want to know why I should vote for one person over the other. Thank you.
So that's a generic question, and that would go to when they summarize why you should vote for at the end of the debate. So I would allow the candidates pass on that, and then we can ask another question, please. Thank you very much for your question anyways. So can you stand up, please, if you have a question? We have the online persons there. We would need them to also ask questions, and I can read them to the candidates. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks. Thanks once again to all the candidates. I'll commend you all. I know Milton and the region a bit better after listening to all of you. My name is Olumide Ido. I think my question will be more appropriate for the gentleman from the right who has had the privilege of working with the St. Laurent University. I'm one of the residents who is excited that the university and Conestoga, they are coming to town. But I'm deeply concerned, and because of some of the feedback I've had from my neighbors, my house is directly opposite the new campus of St. Laurent University. And I've noticed a trend. Some of my neighbors are persuaded to begin to sell their houses. They're having this fear that when the university comes, the mood of the neighborhood may change. The very quiet and calm atmosphere that we have may be threatened. And I'm just curious to know what was the type of engagement that happened regarding the location of the university. Nobody's against the university being located, but people are concerned that have you done enough to ensure that you don't change the atmosphere of the community when the university comes in? Thanks.
Sure. So yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that. I mean, as a resident in that area, I would imagine some of your neighbors also have concerns, and I would be more concerned about the CN Intermodal Hub, which is also set to come not too far off the university campus. That's the neighbor I would be most worried about. But yes, certainly. So I had the opportunity to work for a year with Wilfrid Laurier University in government relations, including on the Milton file. And one thing that I think would reassure me if I were a neighbor in that direct proximity, I'm not. I'm actually about 200 meters down the road on Bronte. But if I were living there, something that would give me more confidence is the way they're building this campus to be a complete community. I think it's something that we have to look at doing more of, especially if we talk about our transit options. You know, we don't need to just have communities that are built around cars, but that are built around being walkable, that are being cyclable. And if you look at the campus master plan, which is available on Wilfrid Laurier's website, I think you'll probably be heartened to see how self-contained it can be. They've built it with the intention of it having everything that a set of students would need to have directly there on that campus, on that property. So, you know, can university students every once in a while cause a little bit of ruckus? Of course. But I'm confident in the plan they've put forward that the way that that campus is built, that if there are concerns about, you know, being a neighbor and how your life would be impacted, those would be diminished versus universities in other towns, which are right in a downtown core and integrated with the surroundings. This one is a lot more self-contained than a lot of campuses that I've seen, sustainable, walkable, and would encourage students that are on campus to stay on campus.
Thank you. I'm just going through the feed of questions online. Sorry, go ahead, Ms. Inena, if you have a question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Neno Boma. And my main question is, I've been in Milton, I've lived in Milton for a while, and I've seen Milton grow. So I've seen a lot of residents coming into Milton. But one thing that I haven't really seen grow in Milton is basically, would I call it maybe corporations, maybe government offices, like places that people should work. So I'm kind of concerned that the community keeps growing, but there is really no corporations or where these residents are going to work, because to live in a place, you actually need to earn. And what I see more here in Milton are basically minimum wage jobs for people. So I want to know, what plans do you have? Because when I look at other places like Mississauga and Co, I see corporations. I see places that people can work, people that are professionals. So I just want to know what kind of employment, especially when we're talking about the youth, what's then at the employment that we are looking for them to have?
So I think the candidates have asked that question. So we'll give them 1 minute to respond to that. Maybe the question was not properly answered. So we give only them, each candidate 1 minute, starting with Mr. Horton.
Thank you very much for the question. So again, broken record, it goes back to the fact that Milton and a lot of other communities around the GTA are commuter communities, right? They are built around the car. They're not built as communities necessarily unto themselves. They are built out for people to have their cars, drive their cars to Toronto or Hamilton or Kitchener or wherever, and then come back home. This is a way that we built cities in North America, and it is a tragedy, and it's something in the system that is going to take a while to change. But one thing we can do to start getting jobs in the community itself, that whether that's small businesses or larger corporations or professional services, is start building within the community, start building denser, start building cities that are not just there for commuters to go to and from, but where there's an actual hub around. Part of the Green Plan in 2022 was to start building basically community hubs, centers where businesses could go, not just big box stores, but small businesses, local businesses, ones that are going to be tied to the community and not just another Walmart or Costco that shows up. You know, everybody loves those stores, but what we want are more mom and pop shops, for lack of a better word. I think if we focus on those types of ideas, on the funding, again, better transit, on funding just the community services in the city, rather than having everybody go away from the community, we can have them stay within. And then the services and will follow. Corporations will follow. They'll come back to the community because this is where the people are staying. This is where they're growing their families. This is where they're working. But it requires a shift. It requires a big shift in how we just approach everything as a society. It starts small, but I think if we start now, as Greens are often proposing to do, 10 years down the line, we won't have to worry about all of our business going to Toronto or to Hamilton or Kitchener, and we can have it right in the community. Thank you.
And Ms. Stratton, can you respond to that question?
So I hear what you're saying. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of big corporations. I'm more a lover of small business and the value that they provide to communities. But having good jobs with good pay absolutely resonates with me. But my question is, why do we need the infrastructure here when so many people work from home during COVID? Right? What I see with my members is, the government calling them back into downtown offices. I am more productive when I work out of my home than when I spend 3 hours commuting downtown for a good job with good benefits. But why can't I work from home? And I think that we need to explore that a little more.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is something that's near and dear to a lot of our hearts. I've been working in Milton. Well, I've been working and living in Milton since I was 14 years old. I've spent maybe 4 years collectively working here in Milton because the jobs that a lot of the families, a lot of the young educated professionals in town are looking for just don't exist here. We have a lot of warehouse jobs. We have a lot of minimum wage jobs. But folks with higher education, with post-secondary degrees that are looking to work in a knowledge-based industry don't have those options to work here in Milton. I'll go back to what we were just talking about a second ago, but I see there as being different potential hubs for employment. So I studied in the University of Waterloo, and I really got to see how when you have a university campus that's training people in the fields of tomorrow, how there can be employment opportunities that will spring up around that university campus. That's just one part of the innovation corridor that spans across the GTA. But if you look in Waterloo, there are incubators, there are small businesses, there are startups that have come as a direct result of students who stayed in that community, who learned in that community, who get to continue to do that. And we don't have that option here in Milton because we don't have a post-secondary campus, despite the fact the funding was secured for that post-secondary campus 6 years ago. So if we have a university, is it gonna, drastically alter overnight our ability to employ people locally? Probably not. But over the course of 5, 10 years, it's going to make a massive, massive difference. And we've seen that in communities like the one where I was educated in Waterloo. I also see that transit corridor, both the one directly downtown at our local GO station and around the Trafalgar GO corridor, as we build that second station as options as well. If you build density around those hubs, I find a lot of the time that you'll see industry follow, and a lot of that industry is knowledge-based. I mean, look at Union Station downtown. People arrive there, they hop out, and they get to work. I would like that to exist here in Milton too.
Thank you. I do have a question online before I go back to the audience here. And the question is for Mr. Nadu Harris. It's on the carbon tax. And the question reads that, what do you think about the carbon tax, as the recent polls show that the majority of Ontarians and Canadians don't want the carbon tax, but Bonnie Crumble, who's the head of the Liberal Party, is a fan of the carbon tax.
I think it's very funny that the Conservatives have tried to paint Ontario Liberals as fans of a carbon tax. Our position has been very clear on the carbon tax. There is a federal backstop that currently exists here in Ontario because Doug Ford canceled cap and trade. Ontario Liberals are not going to implement an Ontario carbon tax. What we've done instead is we've brought together a strong climate action panel of 6 industry experts. Unfortunately, with by-elections, you don't always have the benefit of planning and timing to get all of your policy done. But previous to this by-election started, we brought those professionals together. So we have 6 folks that are working to build out a climate action plan that will complement the existing federal carbon tax. But Bonnie Crombie and the Ontario Liberal Party have been clear. There is a federal carbon tax. There will not be a provincial carbon tax through the Ontario Liberal Party. We're going to complement with different measures instead.
And I see Mr. Houghton smiling at me. I would like to hear what the Green Party has to say about that.
Yes, so unsurprisingly, the Green Party is primarily focused on the climate. And listen, I get it. Nobody likes carbon pricing, carbon taxes, or whatever you want to call them. I get it. The issue is that carbon pricing from the federal government has been effective at reducing emissions. And I feel very strongly about the issue that, unfortunately, the Liberals and the federal Democrats now have decided to abandon our effective measure for controlling our emissions. The climate change is the topic of our time. It is the issue that is not only going to affect the communities we love, the environment around us, but it affects affordability. Chocolate right now is rising through the roof in cost because climate change is affecting the cocoa plants in Africa and other parts of the world. Climate change will not just be a background issue forever. It is here today. And if we don't have programs to address emissions coming from our oil and gas industry, which, by the way, the Liberal panel has some folks that are more akin to basically, promoters for the oil and gas industry, like somebody from the National Post, which is, ridiculous to me. I don't know why you put that person on a climate change panel. What we need is a climate plan made in Ontario. Yes, I agree. I think the federal backstop is there because Doug Ford got rid of cap and trade. We can have a made in Ontario climate plan that focuses on industrial polluters. That is the main source of emissions. And we cannot abandon carbon pricing, even the consumer one, just because it is a popular slogan federally to axe the tax. We need to act. We need to make sure that we're not playing the same games that people that want to take us back through years and benefit the oil and gas industry. We need to just make sure we are backing effective climate control measures without, hoping that maybe it gets us an extra few points in the poll. And Greens are committed to that. Federal, provincial, Mike Schreiner has said we are in support of a Made in Ontario scheme to ensure that industrial polluters pay the fair share. And yeah, I just want to say that. I probably went over time. I apologize.
Thank you. So I have a question that will be clearer too with respect to the carbon tax. Is the NDP in favor of the carbon tax? And if they're not, can you tell us why?
I'm going to comment on what you said before about with a by-election not having a lot of time to go over all of the policies. So I'm going to answer from an ED perspective. So taxes in general, nobody likes to pay taxes, right? I have no problem paying my regular taxes as long as my streets are safe, as long as children in my community have safe places to play, as long as seniors are safe and have those resources. When it comes to when it comes to the carbon tax, climate is a big issue, and I really feel that most Canadians don't get it. We tend to focus on the tax part of it and not what we have to do to keep our environment health and safe for our children and the future. Like, this is a big problem and it needs to be addressed, and it's going to cost money to address it. I'm not sure that the carbon tax is the way to do it, but something needs to be done.
So in other words, your party is not in favor of the carbon tax?
No, I said I didn't have time to read the policy paper on it, so I can't commit. So I answered from an ED perspective.
Thank you for the clarification. So we have in our midst Mr. Z. Hamid, one of the candidate for the the PC party, I beg your pardon. And I'm going to give him, I know he's just come in, and all the candidates had time to introduce themselves and talk about why they are going to be a voice for African Caribbean community in Milton, as well as all Miltoners. So I'm going to give him, Mr. Z Hamid, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to talk about why they should vote for you and what you stand for. And we have a timekeeper just to let you know. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me. I apologize for being late. I had told Solomon that I was going to be here at 4 today, but unfortunately I found out my uncle was in critical condition, just went to the hospital. So I'm coming from there and I'm heading back down there again. I just didn't want to miss it. So I apologize for being late. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Z Hamid. I'm the Ontario PC candidate here in Milton. I spent 12 years in the Milton Council. I've generally spent big part of my adult life trying to make Milton a better place to live, work, and raise a family. And this is just an extension of that. I've had a 22-year private sector career in tech. I'm running because there are a lot of issues and things that need to be worked on. Things like keeping Milton moving, transportation, transit, infrastructure, highways, as well as affordability. It is no secret that we are in an unaffordability crisis right now. Cost of living is through the roof, and I've met countless people who are debating whether to pay their bills or put food on the table. So just a short introduction. Thank you for the opportunity and thanks for being here.
Thank you for the introduction. Hi, I'm good. So I'm glad you mentioned something, and I'm sorry about your uncle. I hope he gets better, because we're talking about healthcare. And I'd like to know from your parties what you would do if elected on May 2nd to reduce the long wait times at the hospital, and how to really improve affordable healthcare in Milton, because you just mentioned your uncle is in the hospital, and I hope he gets better soon. So you have 1 minute, please. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for that. I'll leave the affordable part out of it, but in terms of healthcare, we're actually spending more money than any other government in the history of Ontario on healthcare. We're investing $40 billion more than any time in the past. The main issue is that in the last few years, Canadian population in general and population of Ontario has really shot up. And so there's a lot of backlog, not just in hospitals, but in schools and every other area as well. And population increase is not something that's in the control of province of Ontario. What we're doing is we're attracting a lot of doctors, we're attracting a lot of nurses. We've had countless nurses and doctors registered to work in Ontario more than ever before. And that's one way to reduce wait time. We're working with doctors to open more walk-in clinic to take people away from ER. So people like my uncle, who are actually truly in emergency situation, can get quick ER support. Thank you for that question.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you. So everyone has had an opportunity to ask this question. I think it's only fair that we give Mr. Hamid this question to do with housing. And I'm going to read the question with respect to what the Honorable Pierre Poirier, the leader of the Conservative Party, announced today to get the big city gatekeepers out of the way and bring homes to our people. My question to you, Mr. Hamid, how deep is the gatekeeper problem in Milton with respect to housing, and how do you intend to address affordable housing in Milton?
I spent 12 years as a municipal councillor, so I'm very close to this issue. I can talk about two things that's causing a serious affordability crisis. Number one is red tape that involves an approval. So from the time somebody buys land to the time where a condo is built and someone moves in, on average, that period is 10 years. It takes 10 years to go from here to there. It can take years and years and years to just get a yes or no answer. And we're not saying, like the Ontario PC government, we're not saying that you should get to the yes answer. What we're saying to our municipal partners is you should get to a yes or no decision rather quickly so people can make decisions. Secondly, we are the first party that actually came out to promise 1.5 million homes by 2031 because there's a supply problem as well. We're just not building enough housing, rental housing, affordable housing, all sort of housing. We're just not building enough housing to keep up with population growth. And it is our party's platform to make sure that we get 1.5 million homes built by 2031, and that's going to fix the supply side. So on the one hand side, we need to make sure that we shorten the period that it takes to get to a yes or no answer from a zoning perspective. On the other side, we're making sure that we fix a supply problem by making sure enough houses get built of all types, in all price ranges.
And I'll give the other candidates a rebuttal to that. I know we've spoken about the housing problem. So starting with Mr. Nadu Harris, could you give a rebuttal to that if you have one? And the rebuttal will be 30 seconds, please.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to be brief. I agree there's a housing crisis in Ontario. I think that it's been in part precipitated by inaction by governments, and I would include the Ontario PC government as a responsible party here. Ontario Liberals have a plan, as I discussed earlier, to cut through red tape and build supply through gentle density that doesn't impact neighborhoods. And certainly, you know, this is an issue that affects all of us here in this community. It's an issue we take very seriously. And I just don't trust that the folks that have been getting it wrong are going to get it right this time. It's time for a fresh voice on housing in Ontario.
Thank you. Mr. Horton, a rebuttal, 30 seconds.
Thank you.
No applause, please. Let's just keep it very focused. Thank you.
I'm going to be frank with you, Z. The biggest gatekeeper for housing in Ontario is Doug Ford. He had the opportunity to pass Mike Schreiner's bill to legalize fourplexes across the province, and he sent it off to committee. He has the opportunity to do the same thing with the Liberal bill. Again, just stymieing it. It's just put it back, and it's never going to be addressed. And then now he has the opportunity from the federal government, $5 billion of housing money that he is not taking simply because he doesn't want to give Justin Trudeau a win on density. If you're elected as MPP, I hope that you go to the PC caucus and you go to Doug Ford and you say that Doug needs to get out of the way of housing because he's the biggest gatekeeper right now, and Pierre Poilievre agrees with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Are you saying that you don't think you'll be elected? Because it seems that you're giving the other candidate the option to be elected.
I said if elected.
Thank you. Thank you for I just needed clarification. Thank you, Ms. Stratton. Could you do a rebuttal for 30 seconds? Thank you.
I stand with what I said earlier. There's no money for homes, and that's why I think this hasn't moved forward.
Thank you for being brief and precise. And I'm going to allow Mr. Solomon Edegba. He had a question earlier on. So, Mr. Solomon Edegba, please introduce yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let me introduce myself again. My name is Solomon, president of the Association for Nigerians in Milton. Quick question here. I share the same concern that my fellow brother here, had raised earlier on. But in this case, Milton, from the time I came into Milton, compared to now, the traffic situation is horrendous. Even just getting from one point to the other in the morning to drop your kids is just brutal. Now, thank goodness the federal government, federal court recently, right, put a stop to the CN logistic hub. I believe we're all aware of that, right? Now, my question is, and it has been taken back to the federal government for a different proposal. Now, my question is, what will each of you do to ensure that that hub doesn't come back to Milton? Because basically, it's going to, we all know what that means, because logistics, trucks, they're already piling around, right? You see the different, situation they are causing in the town. So that's just my question, basically.
Thank you. We can start on my left, Ms. Stratton. Thank you.
My understanding is that it is currently under review because they didn't do the proper assessments originally. And this is a growing problem, right? We are a city or a community on the outskirts of Toronto. Yep.
So can we let the candidates answer the question and then you determine whether or not it was answered? Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Dixie and the 401 used to be the epicenter of commercial motor vehicle traffic in North America. And in my background, I spent 10 years as a commercial motor vehicle truck inspector on the 401. So I've seen the increase in traffic, and I know what that could mean for Milton. Yeah, no, I'm going to end it there.
Thank you. And then you have 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much for the question. So the CN hub, I mean, I think we were very lucky that the federal court decided to stop that because it's been such an issue. It's an issue in Milton for ages, and kind of lucked out that the courts decided to put it under review. But regarding basically the increased traffic, so as I've said several times, I'm not in favor of the 4013 because I do not think it's an actual solution. The actual solutions, especially for personal traffic, are transit, which Milton desperately needs: two-way all day transit service, better local transit service, walkability, all that stuff. One thing we could do right now, though, is we have a big highway just south of us, the 407, that the last PC government under Mike Harris decided to sell off. The Greens originally proposed, and the NDP picked it up later, that we allow trucks to use the 407 basically on their own. So we move traffic off the 401 and onto the 407. Not personal traffic, that's still available for tolls. We move trucks heading to Toronto or out of Toronto to the 407, reduce traffic on the 401, reduce the need for maybe potentially the CN hub to even be built, as long as we can divert that traffic away. And that's something, again, that's not being taken up by the government. And it's a solution we could set up starting tomorrow. It's available, it's there. We're not going to be able to reduce or basically rewind time on the 407 sell off, but we can at least do something right now. And, you know, if elected, I'll go to Queen's Park and I will put that bill forward immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Houghton. Mr. Gillen Harris.
Yeah, so it seemed like there were two components to that question: a movability, like transit question, and a CN question. I'll try and be very brief on both. On CN, I've been early and often in my opposition. We were going through some stuff in my parents' backyard the other day, and I came across the first campaign sign I ever had, which has opposing the CN intermodal hub, is I think the first bullet point, certainly a prominent one. It's something that I believe is not a fit for our community, and I'm very glad it's been returned to the federal government for another environmental assessment that better considers human effects. Certainly at a provincial level, I would look at any and all options necessary to try to ensure that intermodal hub does not come to our community, because it is not a fit here. Milton has said no many, many times, and I would hope with collaboration between all levels of government, we could encourage them to finally listen to us. On the transit side, I'm aware the 413 is the crown jewel of the PC party's plan on transit, on moving people. Experts say it's going to save you at most about 30 seconds on your commute at a cost of $2,000 per household. The PCs are all about value for money, and I don't think we're getting it there. So like other parties, we would look to build all-day two-way GO transit, build that second GO station on Trafalgar, and build up a wealth of alternative options to the 413 to ensure people can move in and out of Milton comfortably.
Thank you, Mr. Nadu Harris. Mr. Z. Hamid.
Thank you for that question. So CN had actually made the proposal back in 2014 when I was a councillor for the area. I was the councillor that brought the motion to both local council and the regional council, and I have been very active in pushing back against the proposal. Let's go over the history real quick. It was actually the Liberal government federally that approved it despite all the health concerns. It's back to the same Liberal government now, and we, the taxpayers in Milton municipally, we had to spend millions of dollars fighting our own federal government to ask them to not put our human health at risk. It was a PC government, Doug Ford's PC government, that helped us with that court case. So if you're against CN, the political parties, I mean, I know my friend here said that he's against it, but it's his party. He's still employed by the same party that actually approved the project despite all the issues and concerns. As far as the highway is concerned, GTA has the worst traffic gridlock in North America, worse than even LA. We are expecting 5 million more people to move into Ontario over the next 10 years. The problem is not going to go away without infrastructure investment. The PC party is overseeing the largest transit expansion anywhere in North America with investment of $70 billion. We have 4 subway lines under construction at the same time for the first time in the history of Ontario. We are working on 15-minute all-day two-way GO train service across all major lines in GTA, Hamilton, and Kitchener-Waterloo, including Milton, which was approved 2 weeks ago in the budget. So we're working on transit, but transit is not the only solution. 413 actually has a dedicated transit route as well, exclusively used by public buses and LRTs. But transit alone is not going to solve the problem. We have to invest in highways as well. So we oppose CN, the Ontario PC Party does. We are investing in highways and we're investing in transit because we need all of the above to solve the problem. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, candidate. So we're looking at the time that we have, and I know that this is a community that is very passionate about the upcoming election on May 2nd. Education, healthcare, social welfare, and highway are very serious issues that affect all of us. And to each candidate, questions I've been looking at from the online chat is, each of you need to really identify specifically why the African Caribbean community should vote for you or any of the issues that we've talked about. Very specific. Why should they cast their vote for the PC party? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So we've been in power for 6 years. We've cut taxes every single year for 6 years in a row because we believe that leaving more money on your pocket stirs economic growth. It means that you decide where to spend your money and not we do. However, federal liberals have increased taxes by a higher amount every year, which is causing a serious affordability crisis because the cost of everything going up keeps going up. Gas is more expensive, housing, and there's massive inflation happening. So we're all about affordability. We're about leaving more money in your pockets. We're also investing money in transit infrastructure. My colleagues here all came out against 413. You know, we are, like I said, we already have the worst traffic gridlock anywhere in North America, and we're not going to get out of it by not investing money in it. In terms of housing affordability, we actually are proposing a real solution, which is we need to shorten the red tape and we need to build more housing of all types in every price range, 1.5 million homes by 2031, because that's the only way of fixing the problem once we fix the supply side of things. So May 2nd, vote Z, and I'll be available afterwards to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horton, why should the African, Mr. Horton, your question, is you, I'm asking the question. Why should the African Caribbean community vote for you? Why should they earn your vote, your leadership on May 2nd?
So kind of similar to what Z said, you should vote green because the PCs have been in power for 6 years and they have not got it done. That is simple fact. Whether it is on two-way all-day transit out to Milton, which, as Galen pointed out earlier in an earlier answer, that the Liberals had it funded and then the PCs came in and slashed it. Whether it is on our healthcare, where the PCs have constantly just interfered and treated our healthcare workers just lower than low. Whether it's on climate change, which is a big issue for us, where the PCs stopped cap and trade. Now they're complaining about the federal carbon tax, even though they could have their own Made in Ontario program. Folks should vote for the Greens to send a message to Doug Ford and the Conservative government, as well as my Liberal NDP colleagues, that the Greens are the ones setting the trend on housing, on reacting to poverty, especially for ODSP, on building the infrastructure we need for our communities that is not unnecessarily the 413, but proper infrastructure like transit and just, you know, putting in novel ideas like the dedicated transit lanes on the 407. People should vote green in order to send a message to the PCs that enough is enough. Doug Ford needs to be held accountable. And that is why I'm reaching out today to earn your vote, to send a message to Doug that he can no longer just hope to skate on by, and he needs to start listening to the people in community. Ashton Clancy, our second MPP, was just elected in Kitchener Centre on much of the same message. I'm hoping to continue her momentum into Milton. Thank you.
Thank you. And to Ms. Edie Strachan, tell us why the diverse community of Milton should vote for your party and what you would do different from the other candidates.
So I think the community should vote for me, not necessarily the party, but for the person that best aligns with the African Caribbean community values. You know, we've talked a lot about housing, about traffic. That affects everybody. We actually haven't done the deeper dive into all the other things that the African Caribbean community has to deal with. And, you know, I've had decades of fighting anti-Black racism, of being an investigator of racial issues, having to make those harder decisions in supporting the community and making sure things like my union recognizes our equity committees, the fact that we have a union of 120,000 members. You are not allowed to be in leadership unless you've had anti-Black racism training. Like, this is important, integral work that works on the systemic problems that happen, that need to be fixed, that need to be identified, that need to be worked on. So yes, I can go to Queen's Park and I can talk about housing and I can talk about traffic and I can talk about those other things, but I feel that I see it through a very different lens. And, you know, I was talking earlier about, you know, amplifying the community's voice. The community is the power. The parties, you know, when you get elected, the parties are in power, but the community is really where it happens. And so you'll know that my values best align with your values and that your voice will be heard and represented.
Thank you very much. So no clap, no applaud, thank you. So Mr. Nadu Harris, tell us why the diverse community in Milton should trust your leadership if elected on May 2nd to Queen's Park.
Sure, yes. How about this one? There we go. So we've all keyed in on a number of issues that affect families in Milton. I think some of us disagree about the cause for those issues, but it's about solutions and it's about who has a track record of working hard for families to implement those solutions. So if you look at the affordability side, I was reading a National Post article this morning, actually maybe a Financial Post article, that indicated that provincial government has contributed about 100 basis points to inflation, only about 30 from the federal government. So that's our Ontario Conservative government making life less and less affordable. You look at the issue in our healthcare systems. If you look at where things were 6 years ago under the previous government versus now, wait times are up. People are spending more money to access services. You know, if their public system isn't working for them, they're seeking private clinics and paying out of pocket. If you look at classrooms, the sizes are up, educators are being poorly compensated, and we're not doing enough to ensure that our kids are put in a place to succeed. With that repair backlog in schools and the size of classrooms, it's very difficult for any kid to get the same level of education that I benefited from when I grew up and attended our schools here in Milton. Ontario Liberals have a plan on each of these issues. We have a plan on housing affordability by building gentle density and increasing the housing supply. We have a plan to ensure that foreign workers are credentialed and there are pathways for healthcare workers to enter into our systems. We have the same sort of plan in place to clear the backlog of repairs in schools, to reduce class sizes, and to ensure that there are educators that are trained and that foreign credentials are recognized to fill classrooms with the educators they need. And I've been working here in town for the better part of my life for our community, whether it's with Conservation Halton protecting our green spaces, with Wilfrid Laurier trying to get the campus built, with our Member of Parliament, Adam Van Couverden, or in other provincial and federal roles. I've done all that I can whenever I can to fight for you and your families. I think I have a sense of the solutions that we need to implement here in town, and I can promise you I'll work as hard as anybody to make sure that they get implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. There's an elephant in the room, and I want all the candidates to please address it. It's going to be 30 seconds, and we have a timekeeper. It's called systematic racism. What would you do to change the face of systematic racism in governance in Milton? And Mr. Hamid, I think you're ready for me. 30 seconds.
Thank you for the question. When I was in Milton Council, I talked about diversity, inclusion, equity. We implemented, I was, one of the councillors, actually led the charge and implemented DI into town of Milton staffing level. Our PC caucus right now, I invite you to just look up Ontario PC caucus. It's one of the most diverse caucuses in Ontario's history. You can look at people from every single background and part of it, and we're all in on diversity. And my family faces systematic racism itself, right? So I understand the issue because my family has faced these issues, and you will not find an ally bigger than me simply because we're all from the same camp. I face these issues every day. Personally, not as much because I'm in a different position, but I talk to people every day who face these issues. I'm on your side. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nadu Harris, systematic racism, how would you address it as a candidate?
It's something that's very close to my family. For those of you folks that don't know, my mother was born in the 1950s in South Africa. She's not going to like that I'm saying in the 1950s. In South Africa under apartheid, where you couldn't drink from the same water fountains, you couldn't sit on the same benches, you couldn't vote. And so from a very young age, it's been instilled in my family the importance and the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And not that those are things that happen by accident. Those are things that are built every day. You have to take consistent and sustained effort to create pathways for members of the diverse community to ensure that folks can benefit from an equitable and just society. I live and breathe diversity and equity, and I certainly would be an ally as somebody that's faced racism growing up in a small town here in Milton to anybody that's experiencing the same things.
Mr. Halton, how would you address it?
Thank you. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I think one of the main drivers for systemic racism right now is how our politicians are acting, how our media is acting. We need to talk openly about the fact that right now, federally and provincially, a lot of politicians are starting to shift the blame towards immigrants coming into the community for a lot of the failures around housing and healthcare and all of this, when the fact is their own governments that are failing these issues. We need to create a culture where we're no longer blaming communities for whatever issue comes up. We need to directly talk about the issues that, it's a government's choice to not invest in healthcare. It's the government's choice not to build proper housing or invest in housing across Ontario. And if we start as a community talking to our politicians, say, we're no longer going to allow you to scapegoat other communities, whether that is the African Caribbean community, whether that is the Indian community, whether that is just anybody that comes from abroad into Canada, or the Indigenous community in this country. I've heard so many times people complain about how the Indigenous communities don't pay taxes, which is wild, right?
Thank you, Mr. Halton.
Yeah, thank you.
So how would you address the elephant in the room? Systematic racism has been, I won't say in vogue, but we all know about it. So how would you as a person address and deal with it if elected on May 2nd?
Yeah. So let me start by recognizing the privilege of my color, right? A lot of things come to me so much easier than it does to someone who looks differently than I do. I would rely on the work that I've been doing for the past 30 years. So for example, we started blind selection processes where names were removed from applications so that we could choose candidates based on their qualifications. We have funded and supported community members like Culla in his fight against the Peel District School Board. It's not about what I think is best. My job is to amplify the voices of the community and your lived experiences. And so, the work that I've done with Justica and the immigrant workers, the work that I've done with our Provincial Human Rights Committee, I ran an Elect More Women's course. And it was we had room for 25 participants, and it was racialized. People had first dibs. One of the women, Colleen, who ran for the position, was successful, and I got voted out.
Thank you for answering that question. So I do want to note that we did start a few minutes late, so I would ask the candidates indulgence. We do have 3 questions. People have come in here to ask questions. And we have a lot of people online who are really taking notes. And what they have said online, which I've been reading, is they don't really see the difference. Each candidate is not really telling us why they should vote for that party or vote for them. And it seems as if it's all election campaign. So I would ask the candidates to be a bit more specific, and we only have 30 seconds for your response. So we're going to start with the first question. You introduce yourself. Please don't give us a narrative. Go straight to the question because we have less than 10 minutes to go. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Obi, and I live in this town. And talking about inclusion and representation, how do you plan to improve inclusion in government offices in Milton? So what I'm talking about is when I go to the town hall, when I go to the hospital, I don't think people that look like me are adequately represented. So how do you plan to improve that?
I guess we can start with Eddie Stratton to tell us about her plan for ensuring that representation matters across housing, across healthcare, And if that's something that you have the jurisdiction to address, if elected, thank you.
So I'm going to start from like a union perspective. We don't get to pick our members. The employer picks the members. Our job is to support the members they pick. But I'll give you an example. Years ago, when I was with the Ministry of Transportation, we were doing a hiring process, and my employer said, people like them don't want these jobs. And I said, to heck with you. That's not the word I used. To heck with you, my union local will pay to publish this in different languages to make sure that we get people coming in, and we will host a forum so they can come in and learn what the fatal flaws are to usually getting in. Is that the big answer? No. Can I make an employer hire somebody? No. But can I work on those subversive type issues and raise awareness and help people get past it? Hell yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Mr. Houghton?
Thank you for the question. So I think similar to what Edie said, a lot of it is simply the culture around a lot of these institutions. It is changing, but it is a slow process. One of the things government can do is, again, funding.
Excuse me, it was how you were going to address it if elected, not the government?
Well, if elected as MPP, one of my focuses would, of course, be, as mentioned prior, to bring more community back into the community. Just speaking kind of broadly, a lot of the members that work at your local and service and care office might not even be from the community of Milton itself. They might be from further away. If we have services that are focused on the community where people can come here, work here, more members of the community will be able to join that. And that means more services in the languages that you speak, your first languages, more services for recent immigrants or for elderly folks coming over that are just new to the country. It's just a matter of priorities and funding. As MPP, I'm more than happy to put forward any bill that increases community and focus on the community in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Houghton. Over to you, Mr. Nadu Harris.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, as a hiring manager myself, happy to speak to my personal experiences. And, if elected as MPP, I would be hiring the staff of my office. So that's where I'm going to sort of look to start. In going through resumes, in trying to assess applications, I think it's important that we recognize that people have traveled different pathways and face different obstacles on the way to applying to a job. So if you're looking at a set of resumes, not just looking, as Edie was saying, at the name that's at the top, but also looking at how somebody may have gotten to where they are, whether that's through the actual analysis of the document or through an interview, making sure that you recognize that if somebody doesn't have the same credentials as somebody else, but maybe equally capable, that you create a pathway for that person as well. So the office that I managed until taking a leave for this role includes a diverse array of people. It includes people of color. It includes women at rates that I think reflect the population of the community that they serve, which is, the way that it should be. You should have employers and the employees of employers representing the community they live in. And certainly I'd be happy at a systemic level to advocate for any sort of employment level reform, because those reforms, so employment law is provincial in nature, for any sort of reforms that would lead to better representation of diverse communities.
Thank you, Mr. Nadu Harris. And Mr. Zishan Hamid.
Thank you. I will do what I have always done. In my day job, I'm a vice president of engineering in a tech firm, and I have a pretty big staff. They're 50-50, 50% men, 50% women from all background. When resumes come in, when we apply for jobs, I circulate resume for review without the name. So that way no one can discriminate based on the name. They look at purely skills. I've advocated for years to make it illegal to ask for Canadian experience in job applications, and the PC government just last month passed a legislation making it illegal to ask for Canadian experience, because that was one of the ways the companies used to discriminate against applicants who had immigrants, essentially, who were coming from different countries. It's doing more of that. It's making sure that when I have tech hiring, and I invite you to look at my LinkedIn, you'll see that I go into diverse communities to advertise for those. I've flown into Howard College in Washington, D.C. because it's a Black college, just to apply to get more Black Americans coming into tech.
Thank you, Mr. Z.
I'll plan to continue doing all that. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's keep at the time. I'm not interrupting anyone because I respect that you're here from your busy canvassing. So we have another question from the audience. Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Olumide Olutayo. I just want to ask for the plans do you have for places of worship? Because you know what, we different backgrounds and different like people like us, we find it very difficult to get a place of worship, like to expand, to get a place of worship in Milton. And so, and with the rates of property going so high, what are your plans to give us a place where we can actually build a place of worship of our own kind, so that we can have a place like you're enjoying this kind of atmosphere here? We want something like that. And
Thank you, Mr. Lumide. And we'll give you 15 seconds, starting with Mr. Horton, please.
Thank you very much. So, just to speak broadly, places of worship are community centers, and they should be treated as such, as far as I'm concerned. You know, whether it's a church, a mosque, a temple, what have you, communities are focused around where they worship, where they have, you know, friends that they can speak to, people where it's a different first language. People come here, they congregate here, and it should be treated and respected as such, rather than just, you know, as a place that is, you know, that can be zoned for. I think with working with the municipalities on zoning, on funding for community centers and community programs, we can build up a way to kind of grow community centers and places of worship and move forward.
Thank you. Mr. Z. Hamid, please.
Thank you. Three things. When I was a municipal councillor in Milton, I put something in Milton's official plan that requires that every new neighborhood includes space set aside for nonprofits, including places of worship. So your church or your temple doesn't have to compete with Madamies of the world. That official plan, unfortunately, left council 2 years ago, so still hasn't passed yet, but that's one thing I support. Number two, our PC government is actually working with municipalities to make sure that more areas allow places of worship, as opposed to very exclusionary zoning we have today. And number three, one of the problems with places of worship is that even if you buy land, it will take you 3 to 5 years to get proper zoning. And we want to make sure we compress it down to 90 days. So you get a yes or no in 90 days, which will make it much easier to get the project started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamid. And over to you, Mr. Nadu Harris.
Yeah, certainly something near and dear to my heart. I mean, as the community has grown, our religious communities have grown with it. And we see too often people that are praying in office space, in community centers and recreational facilities, and that can't continue. Certainly, I would support any work necessary to increase the number of options for places of worship here in town. I think two ways we could do that are our parties don't often agree on things, but certainly by cutting through some of the red tape on exclusionary zoning to make sure that it is easier to build places of worship. And I'd be happy to take individual actions if possible. I want to point very briefly, I'll be 5 seconds, to my mother's work with an MZO to ensure that a mosque could purchase land on, I believe it was Highway 25, maybe it was Thompson. I would continue that work.
Thank you. And over to Edie Sachin.
So actually, brace yourselves. I'm going to agree with a lot of what these three gentlemen have said, right? It's all about the zoning. It's all about having the affordability. And what I've been doing as a stopgap in between is we offer up our space to community members who need that space. And sometimes it's not long-term, but sometimes it's the moments that matter, right? And supporting people until they get there. But absolutely, I would advocate for that.
Thank you. So the next question, Mr.
So my name is Kazim Walibalo. My question is very simple. Car theft has been, that's the right word, an epidemic in Ontario across, and it's coming home to Milton. And I want you to answer these questions in practical ways, not politically correct answers. What would you be doing, any one of you on the platform, to this issue if you get elected?
So that is a policing question. I guess it's sort of convoluted, but I don't know if any of the candidates might want to address it. If you have 10 seconds each to address it in no particular order, because it's actually part of a policing issue as well.
I can hop in quickly. I think it requires collaboration. No level of government is going to get this done on their own. I've been knocking doors with police officers and town councillors who have said that there has not been a committed provincial partner on this issue. I would make sure, if elected as MPP, that I would collaborate with those partners to ensure the issue is addressed.
Thank you. Mr. Zisham? Mr. Zisham Hamid, sorry.
Thank you. No, all good. Any name is fine. 10 seconds, real quick. Our criminal law is federal. Our bail, not jail approach works in certain areas, but there are people who get arrested, get out and bail 2 days later. They commit crime again, they get arrested, get out and bail 2 days later. We need to put a stop to that. We need to make sure that we're stricter and harder on crime. And there's a certain level of crime where people need to be put in jail. So protect innocent citizens and keep bad people behind bars. Our party actually supports that. We've been lobbying the federal government quite hard for that.
Thank you for the question. My answer is simply retask the police. Take away the duties that police officers have to perform for mental health issues or things like that, and give it to professionals, and have police actually deal with crimes like car thefts. You know, somebody in my community recently had a car broken into in a secure garage, and police still haven't gotten around to even dealing with it. So reduce the workload for police and let them get to actually deal with the actual crimes.
Thank you so much. And Edie?
Yeah, I'm a regulatory officer. I'm a uniformed officer, but I am not in favor of increasing police. Like I support Black Lives Matter, and so anyway, having said that, I agree with Kyle. Those resources need to be reassessed and put in better places.
Thank you. So I know it's 6:16 p.m. We're really very particular with time. I know we have people that want to ask questions. It's important to know what the candidates think. It's important to know how to determine whether you vote for each of these parties. So we're just going to give the two people standing to ask the questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you.
So my question is not for everyone. My question is for the conservative candidates. So I heard you say that PC has just signed something about transportation and stuff like that. But then I'm just wondering here is that under the PC watch, the bus that goes, knowing that Miltoners or many of us work in Toronto and we need to access it because that's the way we go. So I just want to understand how do we correlate the two, that the bus station got cancelled. Meanwhile, it is within your mandate about transportation. So I just want to get an idea.
I hope you understand.
I do. Thank you. So I'm not in the office. I'm a candidate. I would ask you to look at my municipal record, though. I was the #1 champion of transit in Milton Transit. I actually championed expanding Milton Transit quite a bit. Took a lot of heat for it, but stood my ground. #2, like I said, our government is overseeing the largest transit expansion in North America. And finally, real quick, because you only give me 10 seconds, is I think removing 21A and 21B was a mistake, and we need to put it back as soon as possible. And if I'm elected, I will be publicly, not just privately, publicly yelling off the top of my lung to make sure it happens immediately. Thank you.
Tell us 21A and 21B. Could you just explain what it is for those who don't know?
My apologies. There were some Go buses that allegedly, due to ridership, was removed because they didn't have enough ridership. The problem is, because I have a huge background in transit, to keep services around to encourage ridership, as opposed to just looking at ridership and removing them, which is why I think they need to be put back. These services provided bus service to Square One, and through Square One to Toronto when the train was not running.
Thank you. And then the last question from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, all the candidates, and I wish you all good luck. Okay, my question is going to go back to Amit. You mentioned about Canadian experience. Okay, I've been in this country for many years, many decades. The first experience I had was I do not have Canadian experience, and I'm a professional. So what is going to be your representation? Because we want good representation in Queen's Park. Okay, I know it's not what you can do, and what we want you to do is to give us good representation. How are you going to do that so that this question of Canadian experience will be in the past? We have doctors, engineers, they come here and they still going to have the
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I understand the question. Thank you for the question. #1, as I mentioned, the government actually listened to people like us raising this issue and made it illegal just recently to ask for Canadian experience. That is not going to solve the problem automatically. We do need to work with other unions as well as other organizations like Canadian Medical Association to make sure foreign trained people can come out. We've started skill training program, and we've just started accrediting a lot of foreign universities to make sure that when you come in from those universities, you get Canadian accreditation, so you're not discriminated against. And one thing that my NDP colleague mentioned that I fully support is more blind resume approach, where your name is even removed, so people judge you based on your experience, not based on your name or country. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are past time. I want to introduce again MC for the day. And could you please give all the candidates a round of applause? Thank you.
Thank you so very much. It's Really a pleasure to have them. Can we just maybe appreciate them one more time? They were definitely on the hot seat, weren't they? We truly appreciate you coming in. So to round it up, I'm going to call a pastor, Pastor Olumide Ademidun, to give us the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you for the applause. Thank you for caring and coming out and spending your time.
Thank you. Thank you for, thanks everyone, those online and those who take time to come and listen to what the candidates have to say. Thanks to all the candidates for accepting this invitation. It shows the importance. I was telling whoever can make it has already decided where their interests lie. You know, if you're going to decide, we are going to decide among four of you. Because if you're, I don't know how many candidates are running, but if you don't, if you are here, if you are important to you, you will come to us. You know, we talk, it's easy to come and talk about, oh, systemic racism, but you not coming here is already part of the problem. So for you coming here, it shows, you know, and that's where I believe they're going to have opportunity to kind of have a chat with you after, just to know. Online, I've said they really want to know who should I vote for. You know, this is not in favor thing with anybody, but they really want to make decision, not about party this time, about who we bet represent our interest. So the only thing before we close out, the only thing that we ask for whoever get elected from you, that you have to promise me that in your municipal MPP's office, there will be somebody from our community working in your office. You know, that there will be somebody in our community from Milton that you have to hire that will be working in your office. So that is the only thing I'm asking for. Because during election is good, you will come, you will there, and you go to your office, it's very difficult to see somebody that, and you come with excuse. Oh, I don't hire his ministry. We don't want that. At least there should be one person hired from our community in Milton working in your MPP office.
You have my promise.
Okay?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Praise the Lord. So, thank you once again for coming. So we are just going to share a short prayer, you know, because, you know, it's not a church service, but because we're in church, you know, and we donate this facility for, it's part of the community. You know, we are not all the guys working, it's just volunteer. We are not charging for this, because that is where I connect with the question about, you know, I know about the zoning for churches in place of worship in community, but the question, the problem we have is that when it's made available, they go to the Catholic church. We don't have the kind of money the Catholic has. I know, I can tell you all the land that's available. I've done the research. I've been living in Milton for 20 years. But when it's available, I can't compete with Matami, and I can't compete with Catholic. So how can we afford it? And if you can afford a facility, then we can enjoy this like this. We can have community service. We can have community town hall like this anytime. So this is why we are looking, advocating for place of worship. Is more place of worship. You know, in our community, as they say, politics starts in church. That's why we discuss it. So that's all I just want to say. I think you were going to say something.
Would you be kind enough to add my uncle to your prayer as well? My uncle is critical condition, just got told today, he's in local Trafalgar. So if you'd be kind to add him to your prayer, I would appreciate it.
Okay, that's good. So let's just bow down our head and pray and share. My Father and my God, we thank you for this beautiful opportunity to come together as one people, as a community, irrespective of your race, your background, your color. We come together to come and listen to each other, not to fight each other, not to argue. How do we together make us a better people? Father, we thank you for that opportunity. And I pray for the spirit of love that exists in this community, that it will continue to grow. And the Bible says we should pray for our leaders, because when they get there, they deal with all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, Father, we pray for them. When they get elected, any one of them that get elected, we pray for wisdom, so they will be able to do the right thing. And more importantly, we remember your son that is in the hospital right now. Father, we cover him with the blood of Jesus. Father, we touch him with your healing hand. By the time he get back to that hospital, there's nothing that's too difficult for God to do. He will bring the man here to come and testify that indeed this is what God is doing, because it'll be marvelous in their eye. Father, we cover everybody here with the blood of Jesus. As we go, we not depart out of your presence. The God presence will go with you. Father, his countenance over you, we continue to look over you. Father, we cover even up to the election day. We pray that we are going to have peaceful election. And at the end of the day, whoever wins the election, these four people, this candidate, they will not be enmity to each other. They will support each other for the betterment of the town and betterment of the people alike. Father, we give you glory. We give you adoration. In Jesus' name we pray. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. We're just going to take a picture because we want them to at least be able to post it on their social media or wherever to see that we are actually taking active participation in this election. So it will be each candidate team with everybody. So if we'll just have, maybe we'll start with Z, you got to go, right? Okay, you want to take that. Okay.
And excuse me for my attire. I'm coming from Oakville, Trafalgar, and going back to Oakville, Trafalgar. So it was no lack of respect, like I.